A piratical invasion of Canada. That's what the authorities called it. For those involved in the fighting, however, it was called the Patriot War, a conflict fought by die-hard American Republicans and filibusters against British monarchists in the Canadian borderlands. If it happened today, many would call the Patriots terrorists, and the contemporary Brits treated them as such. The Patriot Rebellion failed. The men were imprisoned, waiting to hear if they were to be executed, or face something much, much worse. Their fears were realised. The sentence? Transportation. To the end of the world. To Van Diemen's Land. Transportation was not the outcome the prisoners had hoped for. These men had each been captured in 1839, at the height of what they believed was a just war for national liberation, and therefore expected to be treated as regular POWs. British magistrates saw them as a ragtag combination of military wannabes, dangerous subversives, and rambunctious rabble-rousers. The magistrates were probably close to the mark. The men of the Hunters' Lodge, as they styled themselves, joined the ill-fated rebellion for a variety of reasons, ranging from political extremism to French nationalism to simple glory chasing. Problem was, they didn't have international support. Worried about being dragged into a conflict they didn't want, the British and US governments worked together to corner and capture the rebels. A few were hanged, but the majority were confined aboard great prison ships and exiled to the very edge of Britain's empire. Whether they knew it or not, they were now en route to Van Diemen's Land, what's now Tasmania. These men were different from the other prisoners aboard the ships. Unlike the vast, vast majority, they were educated. They read political literature and, while imprisoned, wrote letters far and wide pleading their cause. They knew the power of a story, and some recorded the details of their harrowing journeys to Hobart Town for history to remember. Personally, I have to thank them for it, as they've given us a window into life aboard a prison ship that otherwise might have been lost to time. The following stories are those of 4 men, rebels for a lost cause on the path of exile. Their names were Robert Marsh, Daniel Eustace, Linus Miller, and Samuel Snow. These are their stories. Linus Miller recalls the first time he met the captain of the prison vessel in which he was to be interred. Tall and with youthful good looks, Miller was a cocky chap with a biting wit. When he approached, I stood stiff and erect, and as he was but a short man, looked down upon him with all the dignity and importance I could command. He appeared somewhat astonished at my audacity, as I thus stared him full in the face without doffing my hat or intimating as much as a "Your servant, sir." "What is your name?" he demanded in a stern voice. "Miller." "Is that all of your name?" "My name is Linus Wilson Miller." "That is a long name. Pray, what is your trade?" "I never learned a trade." "Pray, what have you learned that is good?" "To respect myself." "Did you ever learn manners?" "No, such kind of things come natural in my country, all second nature, don't require to be taught." "Pray, what uncivilized part of the earth do you claim as your country?" "I am an American." "A Yankee?" "Yes." "And you have no trade?" "No, I have a profession." "What?" "I was bred to the law." "Oh, a lawyer." "Clerk, put him down a labourer." "What is your age?" 21. "Where were you tried?" "At Niagara, Upper Canada." "What is your crime?" "A virtue." "Indeed. Pray, for what virtuous action have you been sent here?" "For sympathising with the Canadians." "And what is your sentence?" "That you will learn from the warrant under which you hold me, and assume the right to ask me these questions. If you have any documents of the kind, you can refer to it for any and all further information you require. If you have not, you may well as send me ashore in that old scow in which I just came off." "You are an impudent fellow. Why do you not take off your hat and say 'sir' when I address you?" In my country we do not mind such small matters, but you English have taught me to be unmannerly. Take off your hat. Miller recalls lifting it slightly from his head and replacing it. Learn to say sir to me. I have hitherto been spared the degradation with which you seek to impose upon me. I am a state prisoner, and entitled to different treatment from this. You're at the hulks now, no matter where you have been, how you have been treated elsewhere, or what your crime is. The captain set us down as hard cases, as we soon learned to our sorrow. I now began to learn that a prisoner must have no will of his own, no feelings, no soul. The discipline to which he is subjected being intended not only to torment the body, but to crush and destroy all those attributes which constitute the man as distinguished from the brute. Happy it is for him if his moral feelings are so deadened, his soul so debased that he cannot feel the rackings of the wheel of mental and moral torture which the godlike divinity of the English law has constructed for his reformation. Robert Marsh received a similar speech aboard the prison ship Buffalo, in which he and his comrades Daniel Eustace and Samuel Snow were locked away. You are a rebellious set, you Yankees. You have caused England a great deal of trouble, not satisfied with revolting yourselves and deigning to trample upon our flag, but must induce and assist the peaceable Canadians to follow your example. But we've got you under our thumb now, and until all difficulties between us and the United States are settled, you need not expect liberty. You are a rebellious set, but we will yet convince you and your nation that you cannot trample upon the British flag with impunity. Days into the voyage, and all the men were sick. A sailor's life is no cakewalk for a landlubber, as they, and their unaccustomed stomachs, rapidly discovered. Miller recalls, we were 2 days in making our way into the open sea. No sooner were the sails unfurled than seasickness commenced, and in a short time became general. There were only half a dozen persons in the prison who escaped the malady. Accounts were cast up without ceremony, not only on the floor but in the berths, and our apartment was rendered truly horrible. An entire week passed before it could be properly cleansed. Meanwhile, the horrors of the convict ship began to be realised by myself and comrades. Daniel Eustace. Our situation below was extremely nauseous and suffocating. The hatches were battened down, which excluded the air, and 2/3 of our number were vomiting with seasickness. I was one of the first to be attacked by this horrid sickness, and for more than 100 days it kept me in misery. I can truly say that of all the disagreeable sensations I have ever experienced, none, not one, can be compared with seasickness. Robert Marsh. 138 of us in the hull, on the 3rd deck, which caused us to be underwater, as you may say, during the passage. The sea beating against her sides, which often resembled thunder, the ship rolling and tumbling, throwing us from side to side, the tubs for use, perhaps full at the commencement of the rolling, and now going with us, and among us, from side to side, emptied of their contents, together with the effects of seasickness which caused the deck to be slippery, sending forth not a very agreeable smell. Some endeavouring to hold on to others, some lying down, some sitting, some going on all fours. In fact, I cannot describe all the forms and manoeuvrings that we went through with for 1 week. Many, during the week, had not tasted a morsel of food. Others would throw it up as soon as swallowed. You, reader, may say, "Oh, I have been seasick. I know what it is." But allow me to ask if you have ever been seasick and in the manner or similar circumstances that we were? I think that if you could have seen us, you might be able to describe seasickness differently from any that you have ever before beheld. The food was no consolation. In Eustace's words, our fare was scanty and bad. We lived, to use a sailor's phrase, 6 upon 4. That is, the minimal allowance for 4 marines had to serve 6 prisoners. Skilly, composed of oatmeal, bran and dust, mixed with boiling water, was our breakfast, and this stuff was almost as black as the kids in which it was served out. For dinner, we had pork and pea soup one day, and beef and duff the next. The pork was not as bad as it might have been, but the beef had doubtless served an apprenticeship of 7 years at Gibraltar before going 2 or even 3 voyages around the world before it was opened for our use. It was salt as brine, hard as Pharaoh's heart, and about as nutritious as wooden nutmegs. Add to the foregoing luxuries half a pound of biscuit and a quart of water for each man, and you have our daily bill of fare during the voyage. I cannot, however, leave the biscuit without mentioning its quality. Whether it was originally composed of rye, ground peas, oatmeal, or all together, I cannot positively assert. It was so hard, coarse, and unpalatable that there would have been no danger of our growing dyspeptic upon it, if it had been perfectly clean. But when we found out there was a peculiar feline odour attached to it, indicating that it had been in the vicinity of cats, we felt little inclination to eat it. On this disgusting fare, our bodies and souls were expected to keep company during a long and changeful voyage. Other prisoners had it worse. From Samuel Snow. If I rightly remember, the orders given to the commissary in the distribution of our fodder was 4 upon 2. That is, 4 of us ought to have what 2 of the Marines did have. But instead of these directions being strictly adhered to, I am sure that on many occasions, a whole brigade upon 1 would have been nearer to the fact. If the men wouldn't eat it, the ship's filthier passengers certainly would. Eustace recalled what happened to the prison section of the ship just after they caught the northeast trade winds. It was vile. At last we ran the trades down, or, in other words, the northeast wind died away and left us becalmed, 2 or 3 degrees north of the equator. Our situation below now became truly terrible. The heat had warmed into life myriads of vermin that no cleanliness on our part could prevent from preying upon us. Cockroaches, ants, and flies mingled even with our scanty fare, and, as if our bread was not bad enough before, maggots and other animalcules made it their home. Dental problems plagued the prisoners for the duration of their voyage, and Robert Marsh suffered more than most. We were now getting to where it was warm, and being allowed 1 pint of water per day after our seasickness was over, we suffered greatly from thirst. Between hunger, thirst, vermin, and close confinement, and many other inconveniences, besides living on salt provisions, we came near perishing. Scarcely a day passed, but some of us had 1, 2, 3, or 4 teeth extracted, and some were obliged to call the doctor from his berth in the middle of the night to extract teeth for them, and some were so loose that we could pick them out with our fingers. I was compelled to call him on one occasion in the night, when it appeared to me that I could not live until the morning. I had had the toothache before, but it was but a slight pain compared to what I then suffered. It was now so severe that it was impossible for me to lie in my berth, and it appeared to me that a person could not have the toothache half as bad as I did that night. It appeared to be a second double tooth, and I told the doctor that I was ashamed to call him up to extract a tooth for me. "Oh," he said, "it is nothing strange. I have seen people perfectly crazy with it. It appears you men will lose all your teeth before we get into port." The problems didn't stop there. Myself, together with 3 or 4 others, underwent much suffering from frozen feet, and when we got where we could pull off our socks, the skin came off with them, which made our feet feel tender, and the effects of salt water caused such itching that I really thought we should scratch them off. Confinement such as the defeated rebels endured affects men in their own ways. For Miller, it was confronting living shoulder to shoulder with London's vagrants, thieves, and cutthroats. To me, the prison was a floating hell, the most horrid blasphemy and disgusting obscenity from daylight in the morning till 10 o'clock at night were, without one moment's cessation, ringing in my ears. The general conversation of these wretched men related to the crimes of which they professed to have been guilty, and he whose life had been the most iniquitous was esteemed the best man. I tried to close my ears and shut my eyes against all, but found this a difficult task. All hands were divested of irons soon after we sailed. This is customary on board convict ships, Were it otherwise, the clanking of chains would drown out even the blasphemy of many voices. On Miller's ship, the doctor believed wine was the best remedy for scurvy. Divvying it out amongst the men had predictable results. Although the quantity of wine allowed each man was small, its effects were always visible for a few succeeding hours. I have often counted a dozen men settling their little quarrels at such times. A ring around the belligerent was always formed on these occasions by the lookers-on, and seconds duly appointed to see fair play. The practice of fighting among the lower classes of the English and Irish is far more common than with my countrymen. A systematic code of laws for the guidance of the principals and seconds was universally known and observed. Kicking, striking, or offering any injury to an antagonist when down, gouging eyes, so common in the civilized state of Michigan, or anything of the sort, was never dreamed of amongst these scientific warriors. They invariably fought from principle and according to law. Eustace observed similar unwritten rules aboard his ship. We had not been at sea long before we discovered that we were not regarded as felons by the ship's company, and although we were narrowly guarded, no one felt himself disgraced by holding a familiar conversation with us, when an opportunity offered, while we were on deck. Having a little money left, several of us bought mess utensils, such as spoons, knives and pannikins, from the soldiers who kept guard over us. In this way, after a time, we were enabled to eat our food more like men. This addition to our comfort soon created a stir among the sailors, who, as we increased our stores, found that theirs diminished in the same proportion. It turned out that the soldiers had stolen from the sailors the articles they had sold to us. This was reported to the officer of the deck, who immediately compelled us to return our newly acquired table furniture to the rightful owners. Not disheartened by this summary proceeding, we again opened trade with the soldiers, and soon supplied ourselves with a similar assortment of mess utensils, which we were allowed to keep. It seems that even he suffered from FOMO. From what little I saw of the sailors, I judged them to be a fine set of jovial fellows, active in the performance of their duty and respectful to the officers. In the evenings, in fine weather, they had singing and storytelling, but our confined situation excluded us from making any observations upon the merits of their amusements. Despite the small comforts allowed the men, a general fear settled over them as they neared their destination. They wanted nothing more than to leave the ship, but a life in the Van Diemen colony was even more foreboding. Daniel Eustace, we longed to escape from the floating prison in which we had suffered such horrid deprivations, such intolerable seasickness, such annoyance from vermin, such suffocating heat, and such prolonged nauseous feelings as inevitably resulted from our long confinement in a place so poorly ventilated. A dark and gloomy prospect was now before us. We were captives and faced a life of slavery under cruel taskmasters in a distant penal colony. Fear was in the air. Daniel Eustace. We knew that the pages of British history was blotted all over with the dark spots of cruelty. That England had always tortured those who had dared to oppose the extension and perpetuation of her rule in the four quarters of the globe. Samuel Snow. Thus, we found ourselves again on terra firma, on the celebrated as well as notorious Van Diemen's Island, situated, as I should think, without consulting geographers, on the very southeastern outskirts of habitable creation. From the Hobart Town Convict Record, 1840. On 28th September 1839, the ship Buffalo left Quebec, Canada, taking 144 prisoners to Van Diemen's Land and New South Wales, following the Patriot War in Canada in 1937 and 1938. Some of the prisoners were French-Canadian Patriots, and others were American Patriots, captured after the Battle of the Windmill. The ship went first to Van Diemen's Land, arriving at Hobart on 11th of February 1840, where most of the American prisoners were landed, and then went on to Sydney, arriving on the 26th of February 1840, where the 58 French-speaking prisoners were landed. They were separated mainly because there was hostility between the Americans from Lower Canada and the Canadians from Upper Canada. The prisoners were, in the main, literate, idealistic, and honest men. These literate, idealistic, and honest men had survived the journey, only to face one far more challenging ahead. They were now at the mercy and at the service of a colonial regime that despised them as crown traitors. Like it or not, they were also now soldiers in a different kind of war, one that changed Van Diemen's Land and Tasmania. And finally, Robert Marsh left us a message. It's an answer to that question of courage those who don't know ask those of us who do. This is Robert Marsh's message. My object in describing so particularly our situation is to answer those who have said to me since my return, "Oh, if I had been aboard that ship, I think I would never have gone to Van Diemen's Land." Now, such a man, whoever he may be, has no idea of the condition we were in aboard a strong prison ship, with, at least, 25 men armed and equipped as the law directs, on duty over us at different stations day and night during our passage. Now, I have learned this much for certain during the last 7 years, that when I hear a man talking and boasting loud and telling what he would do, how he would fight, that he would let them know that he could do this and do that he would never submit or in any matter knuckle, that he would fight till he died, and so on, I say, I have learned to put him down as a coward. Those were 4 tales of penal transportation from Canada's defeated Patriot rebellion. But what do you think? Did you know about the Patriot War? Do you think Miller was gutsy or foolish in disrespecting the captain so early on? How do you think the men got by on boot leather beef and cat stink biscuit? Does Robert Marsh's final statement resonate with you? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching this one. If you'd like to read more about the people, places and events mentioned here, check out the references in the description. Also, if you've got an idea or a story to share, I want to hear it, so do let me know in the comments. If you like this sort of content, hit that subscribe button and show your support on Ko-fi. It makes a big difference. I also look forward to reading your thoughts, as it's my favourite part of making these videos by a long way. I hope hearing one of these voices has given you some food for thought, and I'll see you in the next one.